What if I told you that the most dangerous trap in relationships isn't what you see on the surface? What if the most vulnerable targets are often those who seem the most secure? In today's video, we're uncovering a painful truth about married women, a truth that exposes the vulnerability beneath their vows. It's not about weakness, and it's certainly not about a lack of morals. It's about the human nature that we all share and how temptation can strike in the most unexpected ways. Now, no one wakes up and thinks, "Today, I'll destroy my marriage." But this is how it starts, with the smallest of moments. The innocent conversation, the lingering glance, or the rush of excitement when she gets a message from someone who isn't her husband. And over time, these moments begin to erode the boundaries that once kept her grounded. What if I told you that the very thing she's looking for might not even be physical? It might not even be something her husband lacks. It's the emotional intimacy, the validation, the feeling of being noticed and desired once again. That's where it begins. The slow, almost imperceptible shift that leads some married women down a path they never intended to walk. In the world of Stoicism, we believe in understanding human nature, the temptations that can arise, and most importantly, the internal battles that can make someone question everything they've ever stood for. But why are some married women easier prey than others? This is the untold story, the psychological forces at play, the slow creep of doubt, the search for something missing. And we're about to dive deep into it. But let's get one thing straight. This isn't about shaming anyone. It's about understanding the psychology that drives us all, even when we don't realize it ourselves. Stay with me, because the truth is more complicated than it seems. The unspoken void. Why some married women seek external attention. Marriage at its core is meant to be a partnership, a bond between two people who share their lives, their struggles, and their victories. But somewhere along the way, some marriages start to change. The spark fades, the deep conversations become fewer, and eventually, the bond that once felt unbreakable starts to fray. We've all heard the phrase, "I'm not in love anymore." But love isn't always the problem. Sometimes it's not about the love that's been lost, but about something else entirely. The emotional intimacy that one person craves but can't find anymore. Women especially are wired for deep emotional connections, the kind of connection that makes them feel seen, heard, and understood. When this emotional intimacy is missing, it can feel like a void that's impossible to fill. But here's the thing, this isn't just about physical attraction or sex. It's not that she's suddenly attracted to someone else, but more that she's searching for something that feels missing. Something more than just physical presence. Dr. John Gottman, a renowned psychologist in the field of relationships, once said that the greatest killer of relationships isn't conflict, it's indifference. When a woman feels invisible in her marriage, when she feels like her partner no longer notices her, emotionally, physically, or mentally, the subconscious mind begins to seek validation elsewhere. Innocent compliments, a few heartfelt words, or just someone who actually listens, these interactions can start to feel like a breath of fresh air. It's not about replacing her husband, but about feeling alive again, feeling seen once more, even if just for a fleeting moment. Psychologists have a term for this, the Coolidge effect. It's the idea that novelty creates desire. When a woman has been in a stable, predictable relationship for a long time, the excitement of the unknown, someone who sees her as interesting and worth pursuing, can trigger a rush of dopamine. She feels alive, and this excitement starts to become intoxicating. Remember, this isn't a conscious decision to betray. It's not about cheating. It's about the search for something that feels like passion again. It's the spark that was lost long ago, and when it reignites, it feels electrifying. The danger of seeking validation. We are all human, and each of us has a deep-rooted need for validation. It's not about needing constant praise or attention. It's the need to be noticed. For many married women, the daily grind of life with their husband can feel like a constant cycle of responsibilities and routines. The role of wife, mother, and caretaker becomes so ingrained that she may forget who she truly is outside of those labels. Think about it. Before marriage, she was an individual, someone with dreams, ambitions, and passions. After marriage, she becomes defined by the roles she plays. the loving wife, the caring mother, the devoted supporter. But over time, these roles can start to feel restricting, suffocating even. She might start to feel like she's lost herself in the process. This loss of self-identity is one of the greatest challenges women face in marriage. But it's also a powerful trigger for seeking validation elsewhere. When a woman no longer feels like herself, she might start looking for ways to remind herself that she's more than just a wife or mother. This is where the danger begins. It could be an innocent interaction, a conversation with someone who makes her feel interesting again. It could be a compliment, an engaging conversation, or just someone who sees her as more than just the roles she's been reduced to. And in those moments, something shifts. The woman who once felt invisible now feels wanted. The justification game, how the mind rationalizes betrayal. Now here's where it gets tricky. No one wakes up thinking, today I'm going to betray my marriage. That's not how it works. Instead, betrayal starts in the mind long before it ever manifests in real life. The first stage is the justification. When a married woman starts engaging in behavior that feels risky, she doesn't see it as cheating. Not at first. It begins innocently. I'm just talking to him. What's the harm in that? It's all in the name of attention, validation, or emotional connection. She tells herself it's harmless, just a conversation, just a compliment, just a little bit of attention. But here's the catch. The human brain is a master of self-deception. It creates excuses, reasons, and justifications to bridge the gap between what feels good and what goes against a person's moral compass. This is called cognitive dissonance. It's the psychological tension that arises when our actions contradict our beliefs. And the brain? It will bend reality to make the tension disappear. A woman who was once loyal, dedicated, and committed to her marriage starts to play mental games with herself. She convinces herself that what she's doing isn't that bad. It's just flirting. She tells herself, if my husband paid more attention to me, I wouldn't need this. He doesn't care, so why should I? The truth is, the more she justifies it, the further she'll go. And that's where things start to spiral. Emotional affairs, the thin line between innocent and irreversible. When a married woman steps into the territory of an emotional affair, things get blurry. Unlike physical cheating, where the lines are clear, there's no mistaking it for anything else. Emotional affairs are much more insidious. At first, it's just harmless conversations. She's venting about her day, sharing personal struggles, or discussing something she feels her husband doesn't understand. But before she knows it, these conversations begin to run deeper. They start to fill a void that her marriage can no longer satisfy. And when she starts sharing personal details, emotional intimacy begins to form. The more she opens up to someone else, the more she starts to detach from her husband. It's no longer about physical attraction. It's about emotional connection, something she might be missing in her marriage. Eventually, the lines between innocent and irreversible start to blur. It's just talking, she tells herself. But deep down, she knows this is the beginning of something dangerous. And what's even more dangerous is that emotional affairs don't need to be physical to become real. Once emotions are invested, it becomes harder to turn back. The threshold. When the first step becomes the point of no return. There's a psychological concept known as threshold theory. It explains why people often end up doing things they swore they'd never do. The hardest part of any dangerous path isn't doing it. It's doing it the first time. The first time she sends a text she shouldn't. The first time she engages in a conversation that goes too far. The first time she meets up with him just as friends. These moments may feel innocent, but they mark the point where everything starts to shift. Once she takes that first step, the second one becomes easier. And before she knows it, something that once felt forbidden starts to feel normal. The problem is, she's already walking down a path she never intended to take. And this is where the mind gets dangerous. The addictive nature of romance and the guilt that follows romantic attraction works in much the same way as addiction. When someone feels desired, their brain releases dopamine, the same chemical triggered by things like food, drugs, or gambling. This is the rush of a new connection. And once a woman feels that rush, it's hard to stop seeking it. At first, lying feels unnatural, hiding texts, making excuses. But the more she does it, the easier it becomes. Eventually, the guilt fades, and she starts to believe her own lies. It's like living in a constant state of denial, convincing herself that she's not doing anything wrong. But the longer she lives in this state, the more detached she becomes from the reality of her actions.